Hello, I am Paula Bennett and welcome to my podcast, Ask Me Anything. I've gone through plenty of ups and downs in my life and have learned a lot along the way. But now that I've got a midlife crisis reinvention under my belt, I know it's never too late to learn something new. That's why on this podcast, I'm talking to Kiwis from all walks of life to hear about how they got to where they are and get some advice and guidance on some of life's biggest questions. Today, we are going to delve into a subject that feels like it has become increasingly relevant over the last few years, and I think some people do try and address through life's biggest questions. My guest is writer and director Dylan Reeve. You may remember his work on the film Tickled with David Farrier. For the last 20-odd years, Dylan has been observing and researching the world of conspiracy theories. He's now turned all that he's learnt into a book. It's called Fake Believe, Conspiracy Theories in Aotearoa. Dylan, welcome.
Thank you. It's fun to be here.
Yeah, well, thanks for coming along and joining us. Now, I've got a couple of rules for this podcast, and neither of them are too hard.
Great.
First one is it's called Ask Me Anything, so I can ask anything,
Okay.
but you don't actually have to answer it.
Yeah, that's how I live life.
I was going to say, I do too. It's a good life lesson, that one, really. And the second is we don't do judgy.
Okay, I'll try.
Which will be a bit harder at this one, I imagine, because, yeah.
I mean, to be honest, I try hard not to be judgy about this subject anyway, so hopefully we can skim that one.
I think so. And anyway, what you're going to do is help us understand it a little bit better, which I think is really important. Okay, we're going to ease in, though, a few icebreaker questions.
Go on.
So you've just written a book.
Yep.
What's your favourite book, or a book that you particularly remember from childhood? Or it's always hard to
I
pick
did
favourites.
not anticipate this.
Favourites is hard. It's a bit like favourite song.
Yeah, I find favourite anything really difficult.
Yeah.
Favourite movie, favourite song, favourite TV program. Like, there's lots that are at a time. I can't think of any right now, but I guess I don't read books as much as, I might like to. You have that kind of aspirational personality, and you're like, the aspirational me reads a lot of books. The real me reads a lot of tweets and watches a lot of TV.
Yeah. I interviewed Kerry Woodham, and
She didn't answer for that.
Oh my goodness, and she's gone back and reread all the classics and everything like that, and I had to nod, like I just thought, oh, of course. Yet really, inside I was just thinking, yeah, that's an aspiration.
I usually tend toward like non-fiction books. I read a lot of biographies. I don't know, I find people interesting, so I think that's where I'm at. I'm reading Blue Bloods at the moment. I'm reading Emily Wright's new book. I can't remember the title of it right now.
There you go. There you go. Okay, is it easier then because you're into film and you're into TV? And is there a favourite film or TV or something that you particularly
Same
love?
problem.
Yeah.
Still trying to think. I mean, there's TV programs I go back to. I watch like some programs again and again. 30 Rock is a comedy I watch all the time. But I also watch a lot of like documentary, reality TV, like less of the Love Island and more of the, dare I say it, like the treasure hunting shows. But
Yeah.
a bit
of escapism's okay.
I think so.
We're allowed to, aren't we?
Yeah, it's hard though. I mean, the problem is now that I have such a short attention span and there's so much content to consume that sometimes I just feel daunted. You look at that Netflix screen and it's like 22 episodes, 30 minutes each, and I'm just like, I can't even start.
Yeah.
So
My husband and I often have words. I'm like, you're not even helping to find which one we're going to watch.
Exactly.
And he's like, it's just all too much for me.
Yeah, the whole world is a video rental store that we used to walk into the video store and just stare at the shelves and go, I don't know, and leave. Now that's the whole world.
Okay, we want to get to know you a little bit more before we get into the advice part of the podcast. Why the interest in storytelling? Where did that come from?
I don't know. For a day job, I make television, and I have done for the last sort of 20-something years. And that I can isolate a time when that began, which was I was 8, and I went to the Devonport Arts Community Fair, and the old TVNZ outdoor broadcast was set up there for people to look at. And I played with the cameras, and I played with the vision switcher, and I went, this is really cool. And I decided I wanted to do something like that.
But at 8, you didn't even have a TV in your home, did you?
No. Shortly after that, I got a TV, like a little black and white TV that I had.
Yeah.
But like TV wasn't a part of my day-to-day life like it was when I was at my grandparents'. I'd watch TV. But something about, I don't know if it was the technology that drew me in first, but once I'd sort of seen how, you point a camera at things and you push a button and it changes cameras and you can, pan and tilt and zoom. I was like, that's cool.
So is it more about the technology than the actual
I think it was
storytelling?
initially.
Yeah.
And I'm still a technology geek for it, but like, there's only so much you can do just paying attention to the technology.
So there's not many kids that didn't have a TV till they were around 10 years old.
Yeah.
So would you encourage that in our young people today?
I don't think it's realistic anymore. Like, people get really panicky about screen time and stuff. Like, I've got 3 kids and they don't have any reasonable screen time boundaries. I think more important is sort of paying attention to what they're taking from it and what they're consuming.
Yeah. Now, I said it in the intro about Tickled with David Farrier and that you co-directed. First of all, for those of us that don't know, I mean, I've got a general theme of it, but I haven't seen it, I'm going to be honest. So can you give us a little bit of a snapshot of it?
So Tickled is like a film that follows us tracing a weird story on the that came out of the internet. I don't know if you're familiar with the internet, but there's lots of weird stuff on it.
Oh, really?
And in this instance, what it was, I don't know if David Farrier, I don't know if you remember, he used to do like the late night Nightline bit, and there used to be, here's the woman with the donkey, and here's the, whatever, strange visiting band. He saw this ad on Facebook for a tickling competition.
Like literally tickle.
Yeah. And they wanted athletic heterosexual men to come and tie each other up and tickle each other. And it was a competition, apparently. You get flown to LA and put up in a really fancy hotel and filmed for this competition. It's definitely just a competition.
And people watch it? Or
yeah, maybe.
Well, who pays them?
Yeah, well, that was the questions. Those were the questions. And David emailed them and said, hey, this sounds really interesting. I'd love to do a story for Nightline. And they went, we don't want any homosexual journalists. And so obviously that was, you're kind of like, that's an interesting red rag you're waving in front of me. And so the film documents essentially us trying to figure out what the hell was going on. And what the hell was going on, without being too spoilery, is it not what was claimed.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that's the same itch that has led me into conspiracy theories, is kind of solving weird online internet puzzles, or just kind of watching weird internet stuff.
Because you got approached at the premiere overseas, didn't you, by one of the organisers, is that right? Yeah,
so the subject of the documentary, the person who had been like elusive to us and refused to participate and threatened to have us deported from the US when we tried to encounter them, turned up at one of our Q&A sessions, my Q&A session in LA. We did, there were 2 of us, so we did LA and New York at the same time, and turned up at my session in LA and confronted me about it, which was...
Was that weird?
That was weird. We filmed that, and that became then the subject of like a little follow-up documentary that just kind of explored the chaos of releasing this film.
Wow. So you were confronted, and I mean, David Farrier's now got his new one out, which is Mr. Organ, which I believe equally is a bit controversial. And he has admitted that he's genuinely fearful, to an extent he almost regrets making the film. Is there a certain madness that kind of drives this investigative work?
Yeah, I think so. And it's interesting because, often the thing is you're telling stories or kind of exposing information about people that they wouldn't necessarily want known. And I'm not like talking about doxing people or things like that, but you're just kind of lifting the lid on stuff that people aren't so keen on having out there.
Yeah.
And people react to that in unusual ways. And, depending on what you're writing about, you might end up with a lot of people seeing you as a threat, like attacking you as someone who is, attacking their truth. Or in the case of something like Mr. Organ, you've got a specific individual who maybe doesn't want to be identified and maybe feels like they should take some sort of action.
I mean, I've definitely had times when I was a politician where I've been genuinely fearful, but then I don't think it was because I was necessarily exposing an individual. They just kind of saw me as as the state, and in some cases really quite sad and unfortunate stories of them being, having really unfortunate childhoods, and they just saw me as kind of the authority figure that they could kind of perhaps take some of that hurt and anger out on.
Yeah, and I think that happens a lot, and I think politically speaking, it seems to be happening more, which is, maybe tied into the conspiracy theory stuff, or it certainly gets inflamed by it.
Yeah, we're going to talk a bit more about that shortly. So is competitive tickling still a thing? A sentence you never thought you would ever say in your life. Was
it ever a thing in the first place?
Yeah, well,
that person at the centre of that has died, has passed away. So what was happening specifically in that event doesn't exist anymore. It wasn't really ever a competition in the first place. It was just an excuse to get guys to tickle each other, which is something that some people are interested in. So that doesn't really exist anymore. I think someone still has a lot of the videos and sells some of them on the internet, and there are still plenty of places you could get videos of people being tickled if you wanted that sort of thing, or people who might pay you to be tickled on video if you were interested in that.
So what is the attraction of the sort of stranger than fiction type of story?
I think it scratches an itch for me in terms of just seeing if I can figure something out.
Do you have to be a little bit bonkers yourself to be able to delve into the bonkers?
I think, yeah, probably. But
I
think
all
also
a little bit, by the way, because no judgy.
No, but like it's kind of like taking things apart. Like I used to taking things apart and figuring out how they work. And I think it's sort of almost the same. It's like the information technology version of that, just solving weird internet mysteries. And just seeing what's going on beneath the surface.
Okay, we're going to get to the subject of your book really shortly, but talk to me about the process of writing a book. Did you enjoy it?
I didn't know what to expect. I don't know why. For some reason, I thought it would be esie. Like I've written a lot of articles. I've written for the Spin-Off and other places. And I've written, 500 words, 800 words, 1,000 words, 3,000 words. But somehow I thought that I could just, do that a bunch of times and it doesn't take me long to write an 800-word article. But somehow it takes me much, much longer to write a 70,000-word book, and it is much more difficult than I anticipated it would be.
You write, though, I think, really well.
I appreciate it.
I found it an easy read, and as questions popped into my head, you answered them.
Great.
You want people to go on a journey with you through a book. Well, that's how I think of it, and you did take me on that. I'm
pleased to hear that, because I think the hardest thing about it for me was not having any perspective on it, right? I'm just in it, writing it, and I'm like, you get to the end of it. Like I literally got to the end of it. I wrote all of the words I needed to write, and I felt like I had everything I needed to have in the book. And then I went, I don't know if any of this is any good and if anyone cares. Yeah, and then I just sent it to my publisher anyway because I had to. And
thought you'd take the word,
I was like, YOLO.
So what advice would you give to people who were thinking about writing a book?
I wish I had some. At the end of it, I think for me, if I were doing it again, it is just a matter of I just have to just do it.
Just write.
Go ahead and do it. Right. I used a piece of software, again, the tech solutions to things, trying to solve. I used a piece of software called Scrivener, which made sense to me in how I could organise it as I was writing it.
Okay.
Have little individual documents that I gather together into chapters and chapters into a book.
Yeah.
Made it easier to keep track of. If I tried to write the whole thing in a Word document, I would have been completely bamboozled and lost instantly.
Well, I am desperate to get into the content of the actual book and have a discussion about that. So it's a good place for us to jump to a break, and when we come back, we will delve into conspiracy theories.
All right.
Okay, Dylan, we are going to talk conspiracy theories and where they are. And I mean, you've immersed yourself in this world that a lot of us feel we just don't want to go anywhere near. And I've got to admit, I was slightly conflicted reading your book even, I was kind of like, I try and stay away from it. But then are we being naive if we don't? I mean, how have you found immersing yourself in the world of conspiracy theories?
I think I'm the frog in the pot of water in this situation. Like, I came into conspiracy theory participation, watching, I don't know, like, say 20 years ago or nearly 20 years ago, when the things we were talking about were kind of, whether people landed on the moon and was 9/11 an inside job. And, is the earth flat? No one believed that then. Somehow it's come back. But, just like conspiracy theories that weren't kind of important, and you could kind of argue about them just on like a rhetorical basis. You just kind of argue the points, and you'd go into these conspiracy forums on the internet, and you'd kind of just debate with people or read people's weird interpretations.
They're almost funny.
It was fun and funny and just kind of, I don't know, like a time-wasting kind of activity that I engaged on.
Because I'd meet that person at a party, right, occasionally, back in the day, and you'd think, are you just saying it, no, man didn't actually land on the moon, just to spark a conversation and because you like a debate? And sometimes it was, it was almost a kind of a fun thing.
Yeah, no matter what, it didn't matter. Yeah. Like honestly, who cares?
Yeah. But it's changed.
Yeah, it definitely has. And I think, like, the obvious change where we're sitting right now is COVID. But if we actually even take it back a little bit further, there was like a time, I want to say 2014, 2015, where the nature of conspiracy theories, I think, or the nature of what was being discussed in these channels changed, where we went from these kind of unimportant kind of argue about the technicalities kind of conspiracy theories to a place where we were looking at these grand political conspiracy theories and whether or not kids were really killed in a school shooting, and if they weren't, were their parents government actors, and here's their address and here's their phone number, and look, you can see they sold their property in this time. I mean, like, the nature of it changed, and it became really personal, like not to me, obviously, but it became really personal to the people who were finding themselves targeted and to the people working for organisations that suddenly found themselves the subject of this stuff.
And is it a combination of things that have caused that more seriousness and the extent that we see conspiracy theories now, and that the internet, Facebook, all of those are just so much more accessible to us? It almost hits us in a mainstream way, even if you're not looking for it, it comes your way now. Is that kind of a more modern day reality?
I think there are academics, dozens of academics who study this stuff, hundreds of academics worldwide who study this stuff, and they say a number of things. They say, obviously, that social media has been a massive driver and change agent for how these theories spread and what they contain. But they also say that belief in conspiracy theory is actually either not growing, or in some cases they believe it might be shrinking, which I find difficult because it's not the lived experience of people I talk to, right? Where, I don't know about you, but literally everyone I've spoken to about this subject has some friend or neighbour or someone who seems to have gone down a conspiracy rabbit hole that they weren't down 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah.
So...
and more willing to be a lot more open about it.
Yeah, and so there is some suggestion that maybe these people always had this kind of belief, but now we're all talking about the same thing and we're all taking in the same news at the same time. And so suddenly, if your next door neighbour didn't believe in the moon landing, like, that doesn't come up. But if your next door neighbour thinks the COVID vaccine is going to kill them, that's going to come up because there's a van in the supermarket car park up the road giving COVID vaccines. So maybe that's part of it.
Yeah.
But whatever the case is, the narrative has been, I think, engaged a lot more by conspiracy theory in the last few years, and the nature of it has been a lot more sort of directed to our day-to-day lives in a way that it wasn't before.
Possibly a backward step, but you give a definition of conspiracy theory in the book. I suppose my question is, what's the difference between conspiracy theory and gossip? And you touch on our current Prime Minister and her partner and some of that sort of stuff. And I often think it's actually just cruel gossip, that people think if they repeat it often enough, people might believe it and it's got other meanings to it. And then, as you say, the kind of every vaccine's got asbestos in it and it's going to kill us is, for me, a conspiracy theory.
I think there's a few things. Like, conspiracy theory as a term is kind of, it's not useful. Like, it's useful in the sense that you and I understand what we're talking about and anyone who's listening to me knows what we're talking about. But it's not useful in the fact that a conspiracy theory, in like just the broadest sense, is any theory that suggests that a bunch of people engaged in some activity together. Like, there are definitely conspiracy facts, conspiracy theory facts. There are conspiracy theories that exist that are real. Some academics call it an unwarranted conspiracy theory is what we're talking about. There's lots of terminology. It's annoying because it means when you say something as a conspiracy theory or when you call a person a conspiracy theorist, they will immediately argue that you are just kind of writing them off because the CIA coined this term conspiracy theory in the 1960s. They didn't. So the terminology is really difficult even to start with.
Yeah.
And then, more broadly speaking, like, people believe there's really big conspiracies going on all the time, that the media is fully involved, that politicians are all involved, that everyone's part of it. So anything that they believe is true, well, like this talk about gossip about the Prime Minister and a partner, like the fact that that stuff is then not being reported in the media then makes it a conspiracy because the media is then part of not reporting these facts that they know about the Prime Minister.
I used to, because I was in Cabinet for 9 years, and you're making big decisions, right, and important ones, and it matters to the country. And then even as a constituent MP, you certainly had people, 5G was quite the thing there for 2 or 3 years, where people would come and give me their absolute assurances as to how dangerous this was for everyone and everything else. Look, I'm definitely not being judgy, but I used to call it visiting Crazy Town.
Yeah.
Because, you just sit there and you think, make sure you're a visitor and not the sheriff. Because, you don't want to get stuck there because, by crikey, they have gone right down a rabbit hole and they're well and truly there. But sometimes I would get the longest explanation for a decision we'd made in cabinet or something as to how they thought it happened. I'd just sit there and just think, wow, there was nothing that complicated. And in fact, it was so incredibly, but how their mind works. I mean, and you've studied this. How are you not going down a rabbit hole?
I don't know. I wonder that myself sometimes. And also even just I wonder what it is in my personality that meant I didn't disappear into these places, because I really easily could have. I was reading this stuff online. I was online early. In times when, no one was talking about what misinformation and disinformation might be and how we could protect ourselves. So I don't know. Just something about my innate skepticism, I guess.
So what advice would you give someone out there? So my philosophy is just not to read it. Right? If I start reading it and it within 2 sentences sounds bonkers to me, I ain't got time for that in my life. I've got plenty of other good things I could read, so I can just bounce out of it. But I had a older teenager last year start telling me some of the theories around COVID and that sort of thing. And I went, wow, you're reading this stuff. Good, let's talk about it, because I think it's important that we actually do and you don't sort of continue down that. You don't want to be naive and not recognising that some of this stuff's going on. You really don't want to get so consumed that you end up...
Yeah, and this is a really difficult challenge for reporting on it as well. Journalists have struggled a lot with how to write about these things, because there is a point at which you're not really reporting about a thing, you're just kind of repeating a thing. And so I think there's this thing that happens with... I'm going to put air quotes around good here, good conspiracy theories, by which I mean effective ones, where they are presented in a way that kind of cuts right into some sort of deep part of your brain that's like, oh, that must be true. Video is really effective at this, something that's presented in a way that looks like a real documentary, that looks like what you understand to be a documentary. If you put some people in good lighting and you have them say, blah, 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 no one landed on the moon or whatever, it can start to trick your mind. You go, oh, well, that person really seems like they know what they're talking about, and the things they're saying, they kind of make sense. And if I think about it, the way they're presenting it, they make sense. And I think the trick is, I have caught myself at times, I've kind of caught a part of my brain going, oh, really? And then another part of my brain's like, no, not really. But it happens quite quickly. You can just get, just one little thing can just kind of hook in there and you'll be like, oh, I did not know that.
Yeah.
Why do I not know that? Why are they hiding it from me? And it's just I don't know what it is. And psychologists study this kind of stuff all the time and they have theories, but there's something in our brain that just gets triggered by a certain type of information and a certain presentation. And so we see that stuff and we see...
So should we worry about our teenagers then, that they're getting so much information, and do we, try and open that dialogue like I did? So you're at least then going, let's apply some common sense here. Or, as you say, you can't shut them off from the internet.
I mean, delightfully, teenagers are also massively cynical.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
And they have sort of ways of communication that are far more effective than ours might be to them. So they kind of I don't want to say self-police, but they kind of, they check in with each other a lot. And so some of that stuff gets killed on the vine in the teenage world. But the only thing to do is to keep sort of an open communication with kids, because there's nothing else. There's no technological solution that can block this from them. You can't keep it out. And in fact, the more you try, arguably, the less they're going to tell you about what they're reading and what's happening online. This applies to, it's not just conspiracy theories, obviously, it's all sorts of stuff. But yeah, I think the only thing you can do is to kind of keep having those conversations. There's a broader thing that I suggest, and other people suggest it, and I've kind of picked up on it as the thing that makes the most sense to me, is that the best way, I think, to engage with someone who is kind of, let's call it in an alternative information space, is to just kind of challenge them a little bit on some of the things that they think, just kind of logically.
Yeah.
Like you're saying about getting that a list of things that took place in cabinet to make a certain decision happen. I don't know, but I have a fairly good sense of how people interact. And I read some of those things sometimes, and I'm just like, it doesn't make sense that all of these people did all of these things and no one's spoken about it. Or that like 9/11 is a great one. Well, not a great one, but the idea of 9/11 as an inside job is great. That you've, rigged explosives into these 210-story buildings. It's like, how many people had to be involved in that, and how much work was it? And is it really logical that...
Yeah. And then the point you make in the book, and passengers on the plane were then hidden in a military, and how many hundreds
it goes on and on and on and on.
And
it becomes
like how
complicated.
ridiculous.
Yeah, and so you bring that to COVID vaccines, and you're like, well, you've got millions and millions and millions of doctors worldwide administering these vaccines. Are they all in on it?
Yeah.
Like, how complicated is that? And how are you keeping them all quiet?
From someone that was inside government, conspiracy theory or cock-up?
Yeah, I think that's good. That's a huge part as well.
Cock up, I can tell you.
Obviously, cock up, like constantly.
Yeah, you're human, you make mistakes, you don't get everything right. But when people are looking for all these hidden meanings behind something, generally someone just hasn't quite ticked the right box or asked the right question at the right time.
Exactly.
To think of an unintended consequence or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's more often the explanation for these things than...
Okay, so I don't know if we all have, but I have got someone that I care about a lot, and over the last couple of years, they have definitely gone conspiracy theory. The irritating thing is it's all they want to talk about.
Yeah.
And they're so dogmatic that it's a waste of my time having an argument about it. I can't help it, so I do just go, actually, that's not factually true. Yeah. But I kind of try and leave it there and then change the subject. So if we have got someone, to the point where you almost... I know this sounds a bit dramatic, but I almost slightly worry about their mental health because they're so fixated. Yeah. You say don't bother arguing with them, which I
think you have to know when to draw a line. Like you say, like sometimes it's just not worth it. And I think, like, I'm reluctant to draw a direct line between like conspiracy theory thinking and religion, but it is the obvious one that occurs to me a lot, and that is someone who genuinely believes these things that they're talking about, who genuinely believes that vaccines are part of a global genocide and genuinely believes that COVID was engineered in a lab to depopulate the planet. Like, those things are existential. And it's no different to talking to someone who believes, in any given particular sort of religious theology about their existence on the planet and how they should live their lives and how everyone else should live their lives and what's important and what's not. Like, we're talking about like deep existential stuff about how the world operates and how humanity should be. So you're not talking someone out of it straight away. Again, I think the only thing you can do is just kind of find those little loose edges, find those little kind of discussions about logical things or about trust in certain sources. But you're only going to be able to find little bits and pieces that you can talk about and stay in a safe place where you're not just yelling at each other, which doesn't help at all. So, yeah, I mean, to some extent, sometimes the advice is just ignore it.
I don't know. I mean, I totally overuse it. I know, but it's kind of you do you. So particularly when it comes to things like religion, or if you've got a different opinion to mine on abortion, or actually you've got a right to have that, and it's not affecting me or mine. So you go ahead. I just don't agree at all. So I respect your right to have a difference of opinion to mine, and I just say, well, you do you. Yeah. But actually, there's not much point. I'm not going to change your mind. You're not going to change mine. So should we find some common ground? And do you love the band Queen? Because it sounds like a much safer topic to talk about.
Yeah, and it becomes complicated, of course, because we are talking about subjects that do impact on other people. So
true.
That's the only place where it becomes difficult. And, I mean, now we're living, for better or worse, in a time where most people aren't wearing masks and the vaccination kind of drive has gone down. So these topics aren't as day-to-day as they were, so they're dropping a little bit out. You're not having those conversations all the time. You don't have to argue with people about whether they should be wearing masks or not, and people aren't arguing with you about whether you're shitting vaccine at them or something. So, like, at least that stuff's died down, and we can just kind of let people be.
But we've seen extreme cases in the past where parents have not got medical treatment for their children and they're literally dying, and the courts have actually intervened. Can you see, as conspiracy theories are growing and becoming, I don't want to say the norm because they're not, but you hear it so much more now than you ever have before, that there could be sort of more cases of that extreme, particularly when it comes to health?
I think it's possible. I think the challenge is that you're right on that boundary of we value free expression and we value a freedom to believe and act in certain ways, and it's right on that boundary, on that borderline, and it is difficult. And I think we probably will sometime in the next couple of years see some of the stuff tested legally, especially in the cases of shared custody agreements or parents and children and things like that. But overall, people are going to believe what people are going to believe on a full spectrum of things. Like, we starting with like the most unimportant political things and going all the way up to whether Bill Gates is a Satanist.
And in some cases, I think one of the biggest tests for us, and we certainly found it here in New Zealand, and you touch on the Parliament and the protests that were there and the occupation, which is that for some people they lost their jobs because they didn't vaccinate at a certain point in time. And that is both personal and societal. And to the point where people felt like they were losing their human rights. So kind of my whole philosophy of you do you, they would argue, well, I was doing me and I suffered a huge consequence for it because of what I personally believed.
Yeah, and I mean, of course, there's lots of places where you do you conflict with us all together, like, in terms of lots of things. There's always those annoying and difficult places where those things butt together, and I think they present an opportunity for people to break away from, I hate to say it, but the mainstream and into these alternative spaces. And a lot of people at Parliament, like there was a lot of hyperbole around the Parliament protest and about everyone there being Nazis, which was obviously not correct.
No.
But there were Nazis there, and they would love nothing more than to find people who were disenfranchised with what was going on around them and convince them that actually it was a global cabal of rich bankers, read into that whatever you want. So it was, it serves sometimes as like a leaping off point for some people into a much darker place. But for most people, it's just an issue of belief, and that was kind of okay. A lot of people went back after that to relatively normal things, and no one stormed Parliament, so everything's kind of okay.
Yeah. Hey, look, I touched on it with teenagers, but do you think that there is something that makes someone more susceptible to believing conspiracy theories?
There are studies that suggest certain things make people more susceptible. Distrust of authority, which is, I would argue, quite reasonable, but distrust of authority, belief in the supernatural, alternative health ideas. These things are all like stuff that can make people more susceptible, but I don't think any of them, they're not indicative. Like someone who believes in ghosts isn't immediately going to become a conspiracy theorist. Maybe the idea that they believe in slightly less mainstream things means that they are likely to believe in other mainstream things when presented, but I don't think there's anything. You can't predict whether someone is going to like bite into different types of beliefs.
Should we be worried? Should we be worried that it's becoming more and more?
Well, that's the thing. I don't know if it is, and I've gone back and forth on this, and at the moment I'm kind of in a place of no, we shouldn't be worried. We should be watchful. Like we should keep an eye out that there are certain people who are taking it to a real extreme place and are potentially fomenting political violence or just individual violence. Like that is a danger. That stuff we should definitely watch out for. But for the most part, people standing on the side of the road waving signs, like it's a bit annoying and confusing maybe, but it's not worrying, at least, hopefully.
Yeah. And there's different degrees of it all, isn't there?
Sure.
I know some super smart people that would hold on to one of those theories we kind of mentioned today.
And most people are dabbling in kind of a shallow part of the book.
Yeah.
So it's fine. It's just a bit weird and sometimes confrontational with friends and family and stuff.
Yeah. Well, I've learned a lot. Is there any last words of advice that you've got for anyone out there that they might pick up on?
I mean, the two things, like, so there's stuff in the book that I've written about that I would not normally publish. Like, so there's information in the book that, like, I've shared things that I wouldn't normally publish because they're communicating some stuff that I wouldn't want to promote normally. And I think there's a tendency sometimes to see things in the media and go, I want to understand, I want to really see what's actually happening. And I think just temper that a little bit, because sometimes, like I say, you can sort of disappear into these places and there are really convincing people and really convincing news articles that can suddenly land you in a place that you didn't expect to be. And so just be careful about how deep you go, I think.
Yeah, and take a breath.
Think
it through a bit logically.
The world is a big place and there's lots of stuff going on. And frankly, honestly, most of the stuff people think is some sort of global conspiracy, I think is probably just capitalism. Just people want to make a lot of money, and there's a bunch of people who think money is more important than a lot of other things, and that sometimes manifests poorly.
And it can go the other way.
Yeah.
Right? There's people that are on the extreme of living life away from the mainstream and having some nice crazy beliefs and
all that sort of stuff. There's lots of things playing into it, and I think a lot of times if you just stop and think about a claim, you can probably come up with a more understandable reason.
Well, I thoroughly enjoyed that. So Dylan, you'll be aware that this podcast is called Ask Me Anything. So this is where I like to give you a chance to at least ask me one thing.
One thing.
Do you have anything for me?
I've thought about this, and to be honest, I struggled. I think the obvious thing for me is you and I exist in different places politically. Mm-hmm. And I think when I look back on what I know of your political career, the question that occurs to me is there anything you would do differently, rewind and start again? Is there things now, knowing what you know and having perspective, especially outside of Parliament afterwards, that you would approach differently or do differently?
Yeah. Oh, God, yeah.
I don't quite mean regrets.
I hope so.
Anything specific?
Yeah. I don't want to, because you can get a bit caught up in the...
Yeah.
The answer would have to be yes, because one hopes you've learned, and you've evolved and you've got a different level of experience and maturity. And so I hope I'm not the same person I was 10 years ago, that I was 20 years ago, that I was 30, right? And then there's always the odd thing you did, whether it was kind of right or wrong, that people just so remember you for. And it's a shame because it takes away potentially from the 90% of the other work that you did. And even more recently, we've seen Trevor Mallard leave, and, he said he closed 200 schools and one was one he went to, right? It's because times had changed. And of course, I always got criticised for some of the changes I made to the welfare system when I'd been on it myself. Well, I was reading Trevor and I was like, well, it's not dissimilar, right? And him and I have very different politics, and that I felt like society had changed and it evolved. If I was going back, I would put far more resource into community iwi to make the substantial change we have to make over decades for our most disadvantaged. And where we want nice, fast results, we're not going to get them because actually some of our families have had literally generations of just becoming so much more disillusioned, struggling. And when you're living that day to day, year after year, I think we have to accept that it's going to take a lot of money, a lot of resource, a lot of care to actually turn that around. And the best people to do that don't sit in Wellington or are a politician.
Yeah. Fair enough.
So I probably would have done more of that faster, knowing what I know now.
Cool.
Okay, final segment is a segment called Zip It, Sweetie. It's more or less we kind of get to say what might have killed our buzz this week. I'm going to start, because I'll say Zip It, Sweetie. I really, when I was reading your book, it's that funny thing that conspiracy things do, eh? I kind of almost wanted to say Zip It, Sweetie to the book before I'd even read it, because I was like, do I really want to read about conspiracy theories?
Yeah,
I've met so many. And then I'm not going to say Zip It, Sweetie to the book because I learned so much. I found it an absolutely great read. And I would just recommend to people, it opens your eyes, but you don't have to, you're not going down no rabbit hole. And that's, I suppose, what I was concerned about when I sort of looked at it. I was just like, oh God, I don't want to get, I've been trying to avoid getting into the minds of some of these people for so long. Please don't take me there, and you didn't.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I think the thing for me recently, it's not this week, but the last couple of weeks, is just this kind of this crazy stuff around funding of the arts and of the media, and we kind of end up in this weird place where we get really carried away with teeny little decisions, and they capture all the attention, and we never look at the bigger picture of stuff. So there's we talk about, certain reality TV shows that we don't like for whatever reason, and we talk about certain theatrical activities that we do like for some reason, and we focus so intently on those that we don't look at the bigger picture stuff. And I've found it, so many of the articles around that stuff recently have just been so frustrating to me, and I'm just like, just shut up and look at the bigger thing.
It's quite funny. You could get more scrutiny over a spend of $30,000 than you can over a spend of $30 million.
Yeah, absolutely crazy.
And I suppose that's a little bit of human nature. Okay, Dylan, thank you for joining me today. It's been a fascinating chat on a subject I think we're all becoming far more increasingly worried about and aware of, and maybe we should be. If people want more of you, the book is available now. I think we're going to get a photo, because I just think, I'm good. I'm a good capitalist. I can do promotion for you.
Excellent. Yeah, that's what
so that's quite good, eh? So you'll grab the moment there. But Fake Believe, Conspiracy Theories in Aotearoa. Where else can people find you?
Yeah, I write for the spin-off from time to time. I made the film Tickled. You could also find me on social media, but I get a bit sweary and angry on there, and it's mostly talking about dinner, so maybe that's not what you're looking for.
And that's another wrap on an episode of Ask Me Anything. You can get in touch with me by emailing paula.bennett@nzherald.co.nz. Please feel free to send me through your questions for the podcasts or any thoughts you have. You can also find me on Facebook, Instagram or LinkedIn. Make sure you follow Ask Me Anything on iHeartRadio or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also read my weekly column where I get a little bit ranty sometimes in the Herald on Sunday. I'm Paula Bennett. Ask Me Anything. Goodbye.